And we're back, just like that. So, welcome back. Thank you all for joining me again for another installment of How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy by Paul Chek. We are on chapter 4, and this is part 3. First of all, I just want to say thank you for watching the last video. It's getting some traction. I think the insert that I added there, the clip with Riza Islam, shout out to you, brother, uh, has helped it to gain somewhat some traction, if you will. So grateful for that. We want the message to get out. We want people to be empowered, to feel like they can have ownership and say over their own health and well-being. I've said this to you all before in a very general way. It is my humble opinion as a holistic practitioner that unless you are at the risk of losing life or limb, you should really be trying to self-correct, self-modify, self-check your behaviors, your nutrition, your breathing patterns, your movement patterns, etc., to help restore or maintain your health if you have your health. You know, your solution very rarely comes in a pill form, unless you are, being tended to by urgent care, etc. So this is the purpose for this space, and this time that you and I have together is to help you gain or maybe just remember some tools that you may have forgotten about. It's really simple, guys, as Judge Judy would like to say. Keep it simple. Eat well, drink well, breathe well, think well. And most things will be well. But you decide to stay up until the wee hours of the morning, or you're living off of fast fake food, or are not consuming adequate amount of hydration, which is literally what you and your cells are made out of, and instead consuming, toxic beverages or alcoholic drinks excessively, etc., then you're going to be sick. If you're not moving enough, you're too stationary, you're going to be sick. It's 1 + 1 = 2. It really is that simple. So there's loads that you can do before you even walk into your physician's office. Remember, we've been around for thousands of years, and depending what school of thought you come from, or even what faith, there are going to be discrepancies as to we've been here for over 10,000 years or 7,000 years, yada, yada, yada. So not trying to go down that path with you all. But I will say this, during those times, however long we've been here, anything really prior to about 150, 200 years ago, there were barely any doctors and dentists because there wasn't a necessity. Because when people were still very much, especially not in the Americas and in Europe, but in what we may be looking at today as quote unquote developing countries, where you have native aboriginals and yada, 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 these people especially were living without the necessity of doctors and dentists because they had healers. They were still tuned into their own intuition for self-healing. They were still very much connected to the land and the organisms in nature that would guide you to whatever you need to support that particular kidney, or give support to your adrenals, or tend to your thyroid, yada, yada, yada. So there was this ability for us, because we weren't distracted by lights and camera action, social media. We weren't being distracted by all the things that distract us today, i.e. technology, which has its pros and its cons. Like everything, there's a yang and a yin, a plus and a minus, right? But when they didn't have those things, they had to be the technology, right? We had to tap into our own technology for a means of communicating with the plants, with the wildlife, to understand and understand what we could eat to treat whatever ailment, or what we would eat for adequate nutrition for our particular, biochemical makeup and bio-individuality. Because when you consider how recipes like ayahuasca, etc., have come about, it is because these shamans, these healers, if you will, had that ability, exercised it, cultivated it, and exercised it for the sake of being able to heal themselves and their village, right? So they had that intuitiveness. They worked on that. They harnessed that. They sharpened that. So they were able to receive the recipes from nature. If you've ever wondered how ayahuasca came to be, that is how it came to be. being in a place of silence, becoming the technology, for lack of a better term, and then having great spirit, having nature communicate with you and give you the codes, because the codes are out there. So I find that to be really affirming of how magical and powerful life is. I find that to be extremely exciting. And I think what a blessing that we can all, now that we've remembered that, we can actually do that once again for ourselves. How amazing is that? If we want to, so spending less time on our social media feeds, spending less time in front of screens, having more time for introspection, for quiet, for peace, and for the ability of, going in order to restore our own ability to balance ourselves hormonally, emotionally, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that is what people would call a miracle. I think it is really the gift of life. It's what we've been gifted with. So anyways, moving on. As you all know, it is time to continue on with this pretty long chapter on nutrition, which is adequate because nutrition, and you've heard me say this before, of course, is your medicine. Food is your medicine. Medicine is your food. And if you don't treat your food as medicine, Steve Jobs used to say, or has been quoted as saying, then medicine, as in pills, literally become your food. So either treat food like your medicine instead of your hobby, your pastime, your confidant. And I'm speaking to myself also when I say this, because even though I'm a holistic practitioner, yada, 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 and all the rest of that good stuff, I've had bouts of, dependency on food. If you have seen pictures of me over the decades, my weight has fluctuated a lot over the years because at times I've been challenged with depression and anxiety, and those tend to be the times that I overconsume and was trying to self-soothe, if you will, with food. So I get it. I don't want you to feel like I'm just speaking to you from a place of not having been there myself. And truth be told, at times I still want to revert back to some of those habits and traits, especially when I'm going through a really tough time. Like now I'm going through an extremely rough time. I kind of touched upon that on Monday. And there are definitely patterns within me that want to revert back to how I used to deal with really difficult situations, which is take myself on down to the donut plant on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn, grab myself a chai, or make my way over to Fulton Street and head out to Not Ray's and grab myself a slice. This in part was why my weight fluctuated so much in New York, is because I had some really, really tough bouts in New York, not unlike the time that I'm having right now, actually. So I guess that's just life, ebb and flow. But the difference is, I hope to be more evolved now. I'm hoping that I'm more evolved. I can exercise a bit more self-control, I reckon. I'm not perfect, still getting there. And because I'm in the woods, so to speak, I'm now in the DMV. I relocated almost a year ago. Actually, in a couple of weeks, it'll be exactly a year. Because of where I live now, I also don't have access to all that great food. I mean, I have great food in the home, but but obviously the things that I bring in are very clean and gluten-free and not overly indulgent, right? So when you want to go ham, you kind of got to go out to the streets if you're AlkaliYogi, because AlkaliYogi doesn't bring the things that tempt me into the home. That's kind of just a rule that I have for the most part, is not to bring in what I know I can't resist, which makes sense, doesn't it? But the difference is when you're living in a phenomenal city and borough like Brooklyn, New York, and you have literally the best restaurants and cafes all within walking distance, it becomes a challenge. So shout out to all of my fam that's out in Brooklyn, still fighting the good fight of, trying to keep their waistline trim. I'm just playing. Brooklyn is the ish, if you didn't know, by the way. Sets the food standard. So not Manhattan. No shade though. All right. So continuing on, let's get into grains today. This is really interesting how I'm picking up today where I left off on grains in this particular book, because simultaneously I'm actually reading another book where I'm currently also on the section on grains. And that's this book right here. I've not decided if this is a book that I will cover here on this platform with you guys. As you can see, it's called Cure Tooth Decay, Heal and Prevent Cavities with Nutrition. It was referred to me by a Czech faculty member. A Czech faculty member means that they are level 5 masters. So I take, any recommendations that come from a level 5 Czech practitioner as, a level 1 IMS, level 2 HLC practitioner myself, very, very seriously. I look to these people as my mentors. So when they recommend a book, I get it. And part of this space, as you know, is because not everyone can afford to just buy a book at any time. I too have more books in my cart right now that I'm, waiting for funds to arrive to me before I place the orders. So I get it, which is again why I created this space, right? Is so that for whomever can't access these books in hard copies quite yet, we can at least get started with getting you on your path to wellness by me sharing this book and reading to you from it, and then adding bits and pieces from my own life or content and media that kind of help to give context and provide more clarity, if you will, or just expand even on a particular idea. But as I was saying yesterday, I was at the cafe after I finished teaching, and I was reading this book, and there's quite a lengthy chapter on grains here as well, and how they are extremely um, how they are their contribution to tooth decay, and it's quite impactful, and it's not looking good for grains. But that's what that book is saying. Let's come back to How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy and see what Paul Chek says about grains. Be interesting to see if these two reconcile and marry or not. We're going to see. I don't know. I'm in the dark just as you all are, so let's see what the verdict will be. So grains, we're at chapter 63, by the way, if anyone is following along. Page 63. Did I say chapter? I meant to say page. All right. The story of grains goes part and parcel with the story of bread, neither of which the human machine is designed to function. Optimally on. I'm going to read that back. The story of grains goes part and parcel with the story of bread, neither of which the human machinery is designed to function optimally on. Whilst I'm sure this is a surprise to some of you, significant amounts of scientific evidence suggest that for most of human evolution, until about 10,000 years ago, the primary staple in the diets of most civilians was animal meat. Generally, consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds was seasonal and supplementary. Most of the animals we prefer to eat, such as deer, were herbivores. These animals served to condense nutrition in their meats, 1 pound of meat containing the nutritional equivalent of several pounds of vegetables. Such a dense nutrient source provided a sustaining food source during the winter months when there were minimal food storage methods other than cold itself. Although many argue, mostly from an emotional bias, that we must have carbohydrate sources to function, biochemistry reveals that we have the capacity to convert some fat molecules, glycerol, into carbohydrates. Whilst there are many controversial theories as to why we began farming, most agree that farming practices or nurturing the growth of a specific plant species and domesticating animals began no more than 20,000 years ago, and more likely as recent as 10,000 years ago. Since then, there's been a progressive increase in the amount of grains consumed, especially highly refined grains. Yet this time period is but a flash in the scope of human evolution, during which our digestive machinery was formed. The process of sprouting grains changes the composition of the grains in numerous ways to make it more beneficial as a food. Sprouting increases the contents of vitamins such as C, B2, B5, B6, carotene, and keratin increase dramatically, sometimes 8-fold. Even more important, especially considering how many suffer from indigestion, is that phytic acid, a mineral blocker, is broken down in the sprouting process, present in the bran of all grains and all the coating of nuts and seeds. Phytic acid inhibits the absorption of calcium, magnesium, iron, copper, and zinc. These inhibitors can neutralize our own digestive enzymes, resulting in digestive disorders. Complex sugars responsible for intestinal gas are also broken down during sprouting, and a portion of the starch in the grain is transformed into sugar. In addition, sprouting inactivates aflatoxins, which are toxins produced by fungus and are potent carcinogens found in grains. So both books so far are in agreement, actually, that consuming grains and breads was really something that came about when we changed or we shifted our lifestyles from being nomads and hunter gatherers more into stationary people who then started to actually farm food, which then goes on to help build cities and keep large groups of population in very close proximity to one another. Both are saying the same thing about the phytic acid, and also mentioning bran, and how these are in fact mineral blockers. So very interesting, very, very interesting. Also, again, there's reconciliation with regards to how the phytic acids and the nutrient blockers, mineral blockers, go on to neutralize the digestive system, the enzymes in the digestive system, which leads to digestive issues, which most people have in some capacity today. So probably because if you're adding the math, 1 + 1 = 2, too many grains, nuts, seeds, legumes will result in many dysfunctions as far as digestion goes on, as far as digestion. And we can see that it's evident because many people are constipated or not pooping enough, or if they're pooping, it might be a very soft stool. Even if they are pooping, they're not necessarily pooping 3 times a day, which you need to. If you're having 3 meals a day, you should be going toilet, experiencing a bowel movement, roughly 30 minutes after your meal, and also first thing in the morning. So very shortly after you've woken up, you should be experiencing a bowel movement. If not, then you know that the body didn't get a chance to do what it was supposed to do throughout the night, maybe because you went to bed too late, maybe because you're too stressed and your mind was racing. It could be any number of reasons. But if you're not seeing a bowel movement in the morning, you should be addressing that and either try to cope and manage your stress levels slightly better, or severely observe first your intake of grains, and then make a behavioral modification. For individuals who can tolerate gluten, whole grain cereals and breads are nutritious and provide fiber, which aids in detoxification. But processed wheat and white flour, which is just bleached white wheat flour, is nutritionally deficient. Levels of zinc, chromium, manganese, iron, and vitamin E are all reduced in the processed flour compared to whole grains. Since the 1950s, conventionally farmed grains have been low in protein, quality, and quantity. The US tried giving its surplus to grains to countries with starving populations, but they would not accept the grains from the US if the grains from any other countries were offered. This was because the deficient US grains did little to maintain or improve the health of the starving. I'm sorry, this is not funny, but if we don't laugh here, we must cry because the government here is quite happy to basically slowly poison its own population, but other countries are saying, no, thank you. We prefer not to do that. Thank you, anyways. After 130 years of consuming highly processed grains in the form of breads, pastries, cereals, chronic disease is rampant amongst most industrialized nations. The great prevalence of rheumatoid disease is in England, which has the greatest consumption of white flour and white sugar and tea per capita, whilst the US runs a strong second. So, checkpoints on grains. Number 1, test yourself for gluten intolerance. How do you do that? Exclude all grains except for corn, rice, buckwheat, and millet for 2 weeks. If you feel a noticeable improvement in how you feel, you're probably gluten intolerant and should avoid all gluten containing grains. Number two, minimize consumption of commercially produced, or excuse me, processed grains and grain-based products. And number three, choose organic, whole, or sprouted grain products. I have found that there's currently a great selection of grain-free products out on the market, especially if you are familiar with like the paleo diet. I believe it was the paleo diet specifically that kind of helped to usher in all of these products that now tout being grain-free, which is a good start. I will say, tread carefully. Your solution is not just in avoiding the grains, but then look at what they have replaced those grains with. That's equally as important, right? Is it too much tapioca and potato starch? Is it a pea protein? Is it something that they've created all together, that's not even natural, not even found in nature? So you need to know. And then because when you replace gluten, oftentimes they oversweeten the product to kind of make up for the difference in texture or consistency. Pay attention to how they've sweetened it, how many times sugar is listed in their ingredient list. Remember, it doesn't need to say sugar for it to actually be sugar. More or less anything that ends with an ose, an OSE, a glucose, a fructose, yada, 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 yada is going to be a sugar. So you need to count that into your intake of sugar because you want to be very aware of your intake of sugar. Sugar is the number one drug in the world. Forget the stuff coming from Big Pharma, which is pretty deadly and toxic. But sugar is readily available, and it's pushed to us. Well, not unlike pharmaceuticals, it's pushed upon us because it's in everything. It's in everything. And rather than reducing sugar in foods because they understand that people are now privy to the dangers of sugar and how addictive it is and how it really does treat your mind like cocaine and heroin. It gives you more or less the same response in that it is 100% addictive. It's actually even classified as a drug if you go onto the government's website. But my point is, they've caught on to the fact that we know we're trying to reduce sugar, so they cleverly have come up with different ways to identify or label a sugar, which is why you see a lot of these OSE endings now. And they won't tell you if you notice. And there was a whole documentary that Katie Couric did on this. I don't remember what the name of the documentary is. Hang on a second. Food documentary. Katie Couric. I believe it's on Netflix. Katie, I don't even know how to spell Couric. Okay, whatever. Let's see. The name of that particular documentary is Fed Up. Yeah, it came out in 2014. Yeah, it was quite some time ago. And I remember in that particular documentary, you know how they list on the side of a product box the nutritional content and then the percentage of calcium that's in that particular product, or potassium or sodium, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll see also alongside that a percentage point of this is how much calcium is in this product that represents 15% of your suggested daily intake of calcium. Or this is how much sodium is in this product. And then the percentage that correlates to that will say this is 20% of your suggested sodium intake. Well, the sugar industry got together and lobbied, because we allow that to happen, oddly enough, things that make you go, lobby so that they could have that percentage point removed off of the label. So if you look at any product today, it will list sugar and it'll say 2 grams, 8 grams, 15 grams, but it won't have that percentage point of your daily recommended intake because they're not wanting to hurt their own sales. And yet they cleverly are putting sugar in everything. Why does bread need sugar if it's not a dessert? If it's not a sweet bread, does it need sugar? To me, that's an astounding no. Why is there sugar in pasta? Why is there sugar in chips? None of it even makes sense. They're just putting it anywhere and everywhere they can to create addiction, hormonal imbalance, dis-ease, acidic environments in the body, which is how you host and grow disease in the body. So the whole thing is very sad. It's very sad and it's very concerning, which is why for a lot of us, the smoke and mirrors of the society that we live in, the um, the presentation of reality as it's presented to us really started to fall apart for us when we started to become interested and maybe even pursue a path in health and wellness. For many of us, I've heard JP Sears, who's a tremendous comedian, say the same thing. He also happens to be a Czech practitioner. When you start to see the level of corruption and the lobbying that takes place for pharmaceutical companies that include the FDA, I'm talking about the agriculture industry and how there are subsidies and buyouts and cash crops and this and that, and how they're pushing the foods that don't give us any real nutrient and life force, but that actually make us sick. And they push these same foods, by the way, also on animals. Cows are being grain fed. They're naturally herbivores. They should be eating grass. Pigs are eating grains. Chickens are eating grains. So this is problematic because even if you're trying to avoid grains, and let's say you're looking for meat instead to help yourself feel more satiated, you have to be very aware of where your meat is coming from, because if your meat has been fed grains, you're still getting the grains that are still going to make you sick, that are going to cause a whole host of diseases, as we just mentioned, as we just read here. Chronic disease is rampant in the countries that consume the most amount of white flour and white sugar. This book here, completely independent of Paul Chek's book, but recommended by Czech practitioners, says the same thing, that it also leads to massive tooth decay and tooth loss. I mean, it is truly wild, but this is the food that they make cheap and accessible for us. Sugar, grains, all the rest of that. So what do you think is going on? If they wanted healthcare, which they wouldn't actually make money from if we were all healthy and sort of more independent and able to do more for ourselves, who would be making money and who would still have a great deal of power over us, right? You have to consider these things. That's why I say health is a really interesting way to be, to awaken from the matrix. Moving on to alcohol. We are not designed to drink alcohol. Very few people actually like the taste of alcohol the very first time they try it. Anyone who says alcoholic beverages of any kind are good for you is seriously misinformed. If there were to be any benefit from an alcoholic beverage, it would be not in the alcohol, but the grapes or the source material it was made from, and nothing else. There was some nutrition in beer 50 years ago, but today even the best beer hops are grown on the poorest soils, assuring minimal nutritional value. Further, to make light beer and clear, a number of chemical agents are added. Americans consume more than 37 gallons of alcoholic beverages per person each year in the United States. In other words, the average American drinks about 11.4 cups of an alcoholic beverage each week, or 1.6 cups a day. For each person who doesn't drink alcohol, there is someone else around the corner who drinks 74 gallons. That's terrifying. Alcohol, being a simple chemical structure, is rapidly absorbed through the stomach and small intestines. This is why it is used as a carrier agent for many medical drugs and tinctures. I didn't know that. I find that quite interesting. Research shows that the metabolism of alcohol in the liver may not only disrupt the liver's ability to produce energy, it may also drastically affect blood sugar balance, leading to hypoglycemia, particularly if consumed on an empty stomach. Take, for instance, most any restaurant in the world, the first thing that is offered is what? While you are in a state of hunger. It's alcohol. I can attest to that because I was a server and bartender in New York City for years. Why? Well, drinking alcohol, particularly beverages that have sugar added, results in a rapid rise in blood sugar. This causes your pancreas to release insulin in an attempt to balance your blood sugar. Insulin circulates and does its job, leaving you hypoglycemic, lacking blood sugar, just about the time you are ready to order. Hypoglycemia often produces significant hunger pangs and even behavioral changes, making one aggressively pursue food. By this time, you're likely to have eyes that are bigger than your stomach. Alcoholic beverages also serve as displacing agents. Each time you drink one, you are displacing the intake of health-giving fluids and foods such as water and live vegetables, fruits, or quality fat and protein sources. You are taking on empty calories, which are non-food calories. As I've described previously, if that's not enough, alcohol, particularly when consumed near or at mealtimes, serves as a blocking agent, prohibiting the absorption of several vitamins or minerals. Another absorption blocker, just like phytic acid. Who would have thunk it? Moreover, regular exposure to alcoholic beverages, particularly when consumed without fat and protein to slow down the absorption and balance the ratio of carbohydrates to proteins and fats, can cause damage to the stomach and linings of the small intestine. Alcohol, along with many medical drugs and high stress levels, are the primary sources of leaky gut syndrome. So, the checkpoints on alcohol are the following. If you choose to drink alcoholic beverages, drink in moderation. That's pretty sound advice. This is why this stuff is accessible, guys. We're giving you an 80-20 rule, yeah? 80% of the time don't drink, 20% of the time drink. That's balance, you know? We're not saying avoid everything. Consume alcoholic drinks made from organic sources when available. That's point number 2. So again, being choosy and being discerning when it comes to whom you're procuring your alcoholic beverage from, what source it's come from. And number 3, always eat fat and protein with alcohol. For example, cheese, nuts, and meat. Yum, yum, yum. Dairy. Are you all ready for this? Da, da, da. Pasteurization. Here we go. I think this one might make some people mad. Milk was first pasteurized in Chicago, the first American city to pass a law that stated milk must be pasteurized. The year was 1908, and the reasons for the law revolved around fears of tuberculosis, botulism, and a myriad other diseases spreading through the milk supply. Whilst this may have been a legitimate concern during that time, there were and still are many health professionals against pasteurization. Louis Pasteur himself, the man who developed pasteurization, later admitted the germ theory was not sound. Whilst the dairy industry maintains that the prevention of disease is the motive for pasteurizing milk, it is highly unlikely. We know now that the naturally occurring lactic acid producing bacteria in raw milk protects it from pathogens until it's killed by pasteurization, that is. In fact, all outbreaks of salmonella from contaminated milk in recent decades, and there have been many, occurred in pasteurized milk. One outbreak in Illinois affected 14,000 people, resulting in at least one death. Tragic. What a loss. What a loss. The pasteurization process involves heating milk for 30 seconds at 63 degrees centigrade or 145 degrees Fahrenheit, for 15 seconds at 72 degrees centigrade, 162 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1 second at 89 degrees centigrade and 192 degrees Fahrenheit. The idea is to kill potentially harmful bacteria. The problem is that the heat kills important enzymes as well as damaging or destroying vitamins and amino acids. In fact, milk is declared pasteurized when the chemist finds no enzymes present in the milk. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I pose to you the question, with no enzymes, how do you expect to process the product, the beverage? Think about it. Many people are weary of consuming raw dairy products, yet raw milk actually contains lactic acid producing bacteria that protects us from pathogens. Unlike pasteurized milk, which will putrefy when bad, raw milk actually turns into buttermilk and sour cream. There are many beneficial qualities to the fats in raw dairy. People with sensitivity to dairy can often tolerate raw milk and milk products because the enzymes that aid in the digestion of the milk are left intact, as are the vitamins and other trace minerals that serve as enzyme cofactors. I personally am lactose intolerant. However, I am open, and I actually used to do this in New York, to be honest with you. I used to procure raw unpasteurized milk and butter. I was being consulted at the time by a level 4 Czech practitioner. This was a good decade ago, and she had put me on to a place where I could procure what I believe is illegal in the state of New York, which is raw butter and raw milk. And you know what? As a lactose intolerant person, I was able to digest that quite well. Incidentally, not to bring this book up again, but again, you guys let me know if this is something that you want us to go through together. Curing tooth decay, naturally. Also, is a big proponent of people consuming raw organic milk and butter for dental health. So something to be considered. I've not made the choice quite yet. I'm considering options, and obviously I'm going to go intuitively and let one source, the spirit, guide me towards whether or not I should be reintroducing raw milk and raw butter into my regimen, into my nutrition. So what I'm saying is, when you get new information and listen, I've been a vegetarian now for exactly 15 years, and I've not consumed dairy or eggs certainly eggs in over 5 years, and milk longer than that. So, but especially when there's symptomology that comes up, you have to step back out of sort of your own potentially dogmatic ideologies, and take in more information that are coming from sources that you believe to be credible, which to me tend to be not mainstream sources. And then make an informed decision for self. I don't think that there's a one size fits all. I don't think veganism is the answer for all. I know that the Czech system and that book as well that I just held up for you guys, neither of these systems actually support veganism as a way to procure and restore or maintain health. So I found that really interesting. So, again, just being flexible enough to engage or entertain changing your ideas and ideology and beliefs for something that might be more supportive of your overall health and journey to wellness. Homogenization. First, a sip. So refreshing. Water, the only thing we are actually designed to drink. Homogenization is a process where milk is passed through a fine filter at pressures equal to 4,000 pounds per square inch, making the fat globules smaller by a factor of 10 times or more. These fat molecules become evenly dispersed within the liquid milk, so that after 48 hours of storage at 45 degrees Fahrenheit, about 9 degrees centigrade, there is no visible cream separation in the milk. According to some experts, this ensures that the protein hormones in milk survive the normal process of protein digestion breakdown in the stomach. But homogenization causes fat molecules to become smaller and allows substances to bypass digestion. So proteins that normally would be digested and broken down in the stomach are no longer broken down, increasing the chances of incomplete protein digestion in the small intestine. This allows some milk proteins to be absorbed into the bloodstream intact. This could very well sensitize the immune system and lead to milk allergy and intolerance. Growth hormones. Another problem with commercially produced milk is that dairy farmers commonly inject cows with a growth hormone to make them produce more milk that is normal. After giving birth, a cow normally produces milk for about 12 weeks at the expense of her own tissues. During that time, she loses weight, is infertile, and more susceptible to disease such as mastitis, inflammation of the udder. By giving a cow an RBGH, recombinant bovine growth hormone, a genetically modified growth hormone, a farmer can extend milk production for another 8 to 12 weeks, meaning that the cow is stressed to produce milk for this time period. The labeling on the ProSelect RBGH package insert says cows injected with proceliac are at an increased risk for clinical metastasis. By the way, when the cow gets metastasis, the pus from the udder may end up in your milk. Many farmers refuse to inject their cows with this new hormone because it increases risk of infection by almost 80%, which then means the cows have to be given antibiotics to treat the infections. Whilst there have been a number of attempts by farmers and retailers to let the consumer know that the milk was free of RBGH hormone, the FDA warned grocery stores not to do so. Monsanto, the producer of RBGH, who's more important than you, the consumer, sued 2 milk processors who labeled milk as free of the hormone. Of course, all organic dairy products will be free of this growth hormone. Some companies, including Trader Joe's, still label their milk as RBGH free. If you can't get organic dairy, make sure to find a brand that provides products that are RBGH free. So what do you think of that, fam? The FDA warned grocery stores not to do so, to label their products as free as RBGH. The FDA did that, the people that are supposed to be working for your health and wellness, right? They would never make an error. They are just humans at the end of the day. They wouldn't collude with a corporation that's extremely powerful and that can wine them and dine them and lobby them into discouraging consumers from being well informed so that they can make an informed decision. Wonder if that could happen with pharmaceutical drugs. Or did it just happen? And again, Monsanto, the producer of RBGH, sued 2 milk processors who labeled milk as free of that hormone. I mean, this stuff writes itself. It's so comical. I don't even need to add a laughter. It's so utterly ridiculous. But what say you? Drop it in the comments, yeah? The use of RBGH is approved by the US by the FDA, who's always looking out for us and is not corrupted and is not colluding with corporations, which states there is no significant difference that has been shown between milk from treated and untreated cows. This statement, which is found on milk labels, is based on the minimal short-term research done on rats, mostly by Monsanto scientists. This is akin to asking the devil to run studies on evil. Studies on RBGH have also inconsistencies. For example, the only human study involving RBGH was done over 50 years ago, in which dwarfs were given the hormone to see if they would grow. They did not. In one of the studies, cows treated with the hormones were sick and gave birth to cows with genetic deformities. Though the FDA withheld much of this data, they wouldn't do that, would they? Monsanto said that out of 10,000 farmers and 80,000 cows, they only received 95 complaints, and those were from the farmers, but that they were likely more from the cows. Sorry. I'll reread that. Monsanto said that out of 10,000 farmers and 800,000 cows, they only received 95 complaints. Well, those complaints, they were from the farmers, but there were likely many more from the cows. The FDA actually received complaints concerning nearly 9,500 cows contracting metastasis, the infection that creates pus, which can then pass on into the milk. Enormous spleen growths in rats were considered to be statistically insignificant. The spleen is part of the lymphatic and immune system, which manufactures red and white blood cells. In one study conducted by Monsanto, all of the animals treated with RBGH got cancer. In one study conducted by Monsanto, all of the animals treated with RBGH got cancer. Even the animals orally ingesting this new hormone. This study was reviewed by the ex-Monsanto employees who were working for the FDA at the time that the study was conducted. Another issue with the use of RBGH is that it increases levels of insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1 in the cow's milk. IGF-1 is a powerful growth hormone in the human body and is identical in both cows and human. One of the major concerns with milk containing increased concentrations of IGF-1, secondary to RBGH, is that the growth hormone makes existing cancers grow. Pasteurization has little effect on IGF-1 levels. Humans receive the IGF-1 molecule from a cow consuming its milk, and the human body will treat it as its own. Drinking 1 glass of untreated milk will nearly double the levels of IGF in the body. 1 glass of treated milk will increase IGF levels even more, as much as 9-fold, according to Robert Cohen, author of Milk, the Deadly Poison. Cohen is spelled Cohen, if you're interested. That's Robert Cohen, author of Milk, the Deadly Poison. Increased IGF-1 concentrations have been associated with breast cancer, human colorectal tumors, and colon cancer growth. IGF is an autocrine and endocrine growth regulator that accelerates various types of cancers. IGF-1 activity is significantly higher in cancer extracts, suggesting that higher IGF-1 activity in cancer tissue is involved in regulating growth of thyroid cancer cells. So you can see that there are some real concerns to be had with conventional dairy farming practices, and with both national and international government policies regarding our food, we must then support a return to small, local, organic, or biodynamic farms. I would agree. Yogurt has been consumed for thousands of years. When cultured with beneficial microorganisms such as lactic acid secreting acidophilus and bifidus, it's very helpful to the colon. Friendly bacteria available in high-quality yogurt assist in the maintenance of an optimally friendly bacteria count, which is necessary for the production of several vitamins. Friendly flora manufacture vitamins such as biotin, thiamine, riboflavin, B12, niacin, B3, pantothenic acid, B5, pyridoxine, B6, folic acid, and vitamins A and K. The acidophilus and the bifidus in quality yogurts also increase the bioavailability of calcium, copper, iron, magnesium, and manganese. Since the friendly microbes change the environment of the colon by making it more acidic, they actually reduce chances of infestation or food poisoning by unfriendly bacteria, which prefer an alkaline environment. That's news to me, actually. I was always under the impression that all alkaline environments were very conducive to non-disease and non. Well, hang on, let's read that again. Since the friendly microbes change the environment of the colon by making it more acidic, they actually reduce chances of infestation or food poisoning. So interesting. So food poisoning and infestation can take place in a more alkaline environment. Okay. That's not the same thing as disease. Again, we learn as we go, don't we? Those who cannot digest dairy products can often consume yogurt with no side effects. Yogurt is easier to digest because the yeast culture actually eats the lactose in the source milk. But before you get excited and hijack a yogurt truck, there are several things you need to know about your run-of-the-mill store-bought yogurt. Yogurt is only as good as the source material it's made from. Many yogurts are made from commercial cows, which commonly contain antibiotics and RBGH. Choose yogurts made from organic raw milk when possible. Yogurts with fruits added should be avoided for 2 reasons. First, when fruit is added to yogurt, sugar is added as well. Second, the fruit added to most yogurts is overripened or too damaged to sell in the stores. A great majority of the yogurts in supermarkets today should really be classified as another form of liquid candy. When you have chocolate yogurt, you basically have some sort of nutritional oxymoron as you would with candy apple. If you are consuming such foods, you are merely using an impersonation of a healthy food. No cap. If you have problems with yogurts from cow's milk, try sheep or goat's milk yogurt. So checkpoints on dairy. Checkpoint number 1. Whenever possible, buy raw certified organic dairy products. There are companies that sell from organic grass-fed cows, which is important because the type of feed the cows eat influence the quality and quantity of protein and fats in the milk. There are states that don't allow the sale of raw milk, such as Vermont. Yet some of these states have co-op opportunities where you can actually buy a percentage of a cow. And because you own a percentage of the cow, so to speak, you can legally buy and drink the milk that it produces. Number 2, if you can't get raw dairy products, the next best thing is certified organic. This way, although the milk has been pasteurized or homogenized, it won't contain antibiotics, hormones, or pesticide residues. Number 3, if you are intolerant to dairy, try goat's or sheep's milk products. Many people who are sensitive to cow's milk can handle these other varieties. If you have taken antibiotics, raw goat's milk is excellent for restoring friendly bacteria in your gut. If you can't get high quality organic dairy, stay away from the stuff altogether. That's point number 4. Just stay away. Dairy products are not necessary for a healthy diet, so you can get plenty of calcium from other sources such as leafy greens and vegetables. Number 5, if you are gluten intolerant, avoid dairy along with gluten for about 3 to 6 months and allow the gut to repair itself in order to digest dairy again. So, interesting. Very, very interesting. I wanted to move on with animal products, but that will take us way over the hour mark because there's a lot to go into. It covers animals, grass-fed, eggs, seafood, etc., processed and cured meat. So I think I will leave that for our next live chat. Yeah, it just gets better and better, doesn't it? But it's good to know. Otherwise, you don't get the benefit of making informed decisions and intuiting what is best for yourself. So we are at the end of today's session. Thank you all for coming back. I hope that you, again, were able to pull some information for you that is useful. But obviously, this is a decision that needs to be made via your gut and not your head. So always tune inwards. Always a good idea to set aside some time during the day for reflection and contemplation. That is when your most pressing answers will be revealed to you. But if we constantly make ourselves busy, keep ourselves busy, which is what they tell us to do this, be productive, post here, write that, return this email, then we don't have that time to listen to our gut, to even the one source who's very gently tapping us on the shoulder. Hey, psst, I'm trying to reach you. Pay attention. So I would say that would be my thing, is try to give yourselves a little bit of time, if you can, right after this broadcast, to kind of sit and marinate. And if not, at the very least, before the end of your day, take a moment so that you figure out what's right for you and what's not. That is always the best way to make decisions in everything, I think. It's great to have professionals that can consult you, but no one is going to be the expert on you. Only you can be the expert on you. So on that note, get free and stay free until next time.